welcome. Today we're going to be making cinnamon rolls from the 1965 Better Homes and Gardens new cookbook. I'm going to leave the recipe and everything down below. I hope you enjoy. So to start off, we're going to make the plain roll dough, and we're going to start with 7 grams of instant dry yeast, and we're going to add 1/4 cup of lukewarm water to it. So next we want 1 cup of scalded milk. So all that means is the milk has been brought to just below boiling. So now the milk is to the point where it's just below boiling. I'm just going to take it off the heat. So now I'm just going to add the milk to my bowl. So to my hot milk, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. It says 1 teaspoon of salt, but I'm just going to add some of the grinded salt. Now the recipe calls to add 2 tablespoons of vegetable shortening to the hot milk. I don't have any vegetable shortening, it's not really available in Australia. The closest thing we have to it is kofa, so I'm going to use that. Okay, get the big guns out. I'm going to give that a mix till everything dissolves. And so now that it's cooled down to lukewarm, I'm going to add in the yeast. I'm just doing it slowly and mixing it in a little bit. So now I'm just going to add in 1 well-beaten egg. Next we're going to change bowls because I underestimated the size bowl I needed. Oh, so it says to gradually stir in 3.5 cups of sifted flour, so that's what I'm going to do now. Half, 3 1/2. And then now what's going to be left is just a little bit of flour. We don't want that in there anyway, so it doesn't turn out to be much. And then now I'm just going to mix it really gently until it comes together to form a dough. coming together. So now the dough's come together, we're going to cover it and let it rise for about 2 hours. Just going to cover it with a clean kitchen towel. See you soon. So the dough has been rising for about 1 hour and 45 minutes. So I'm going to start making the filling to the cinnamon rolls, and I've actually started preheating the oven to 190 degrees Celsius. Add in 1/4 cup of white sugar to 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. So I love cinnamon, and it's one of the things I measure with my heart. So I'm just going to add more than 2 tablespoons. As much as I like, really. Now I'm just going to mix that together. So the recipe also calls for currants or raisins. I don't have any of those things, and we don't really like them anyway, so I'm just going to leave them out. So now I'm just going to put the cinnamon sugar to the side and start working on the dough. So the dough has pretty much doubled, so I'm going to flour my surface and then use half of that first and roll it out. So this is my dough now. As you can see, it's doubled. So like I said, we're just going to take half of it and use half at a time. I'm going to keep the other half covered with a towel. So now I've just melted a few tablespoons of margarine, and I'm going to spread that evenly across all the dough. So now that I've spread out the butter, I'm going to sprinkle my sugar and cinnamon mixture. So something that the recipe didn't say to do, but I'm going to add, is add a little bit of brown sugar. So now that I've spread out the butter and put the cinnamon sugar on top, I'm just going to roll it up. So I'm going to start rolling it up from this way and rolling it towards that way. So I'm just going to roll it up, and I'm going to try and keep it as even as possible. Okay, so now we have like kind of the loaf, I guess. So I'm going to take a pretty sharp knife and cut off the ends, and then try and cut it into even pieces. Now you can totally eat the ends, but there's not going to be much on there and it won't look very pretty. But they're edible. The best thing to do is not really like push down, but you kind of go back and forwards like a sawing motion. Otherwise, you do tend to squish the dough. Just like that. So now I'm just going to oil my dish. Now we want to put them in there kind of close, but we want to leave a little bit of room because we are going to let them rise again. They are still going to double in size, but keep in mind that when they're baking we do want them touching because we do want them to be like pull apart rolls, if that makes sense. So as you can see, I've left some room for them to expand, but they are still touching a little bit. So I'm just gonna let these sit on the side, and I'm gonna let them rise for about, I don't know, half an hour, 25 minutes, something like that. Just till they've doubled in size again. Okay, so it's been about half an hour, and these have doubled in size. I'm just gonna put them in the oven. It's set to 190 degrees for 25 minutes. So now I'm just going to make the icing for the cinnamon buns. All I'm going to do is make confectioner's icing. It's on page 130 in this book. So the recipe says to add 2 cups of icing sugar and enough milk to make it into like a paste kind of thing, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Now I'm only doing half of the amount because I only used half the dough. I'm going to save half the dough. Vanilla is another thing I don't really measure. I like vanilla, so I don't measure it. So these have had some time to cool. They're not cooled completely. They're still a little bit warm because we do want the icing to melt just a little, but they're not hot, whereas the icing will just melt off.